Hello, American literature students. It is Tuesday, April the 7th, and we are in The Moon is Down, Chapter 6. So we will be 75% of the way finished with the book at the end of this chapter. So let's talk a little bit about some things to look out for before you read Chapter 6. Chapter 6, we're going to see a significant conversation between one of the main characters in the town and one of the main characters in the invaders, and it's a very fascinating one. So the second question is actually the one I want to talk about first. How does the author, John Steinbeck, really humanize the invaders? He received a lot of pushback with this particular novel that was written as a piece of political propaganda in support of the Allies in World War II, but he actually humanized these invaders, these people who were supposed to be Nazis. And look out for how he does that in Chapter 6. The other part of this chapter is going to be about resistance, and we're going to hear some insight into the way and the manner in which the town is going to attempt to resist. So pay attention to that. A couple other things before you read. There are two new characters. Yeah, I know it's weird. We're almost 75% of the way through with the book, but there are two new characters that we'll be introduced to, and they're brothers, Will and Tom Anders. And they are both fishermen. That's why I have this lovely photo here of two guys fishing. So you can take a look at them. They have a very minor role, but it's an important role within the chapter. All right, at this point, you can go ahead and pause the video and read Chapter 6. Once you're done reading Chapter 6, complete your reading guide using the same SOAR method that we've been going through, and then you can come back to the video once you're done. Don't forget to click that turn-in button on Google Classroom to make sure you've submitted your assignment. So I'll see you back here in about 20 minutes. All right, welcome back. Let's move on to some discussion points that I want to talk about for Chapter 6. And again, as has been the pattern, I'm going to highlight three key ideas from within the chapter. The first part, we're going to go back to snow. We talked about this in Chapter 5, but I want to give you my idea of what snow might be. We're going to talk about how Steinbeck actually humanizes the enemy, specifically through the character of Lieutenant Tonder. And then we're going to talk about Molly, and really what Molly does in response to something that Mayor Orden says between pages 82 and 86. So we'll take a look at this very subtle action that she takes that you might have missed when you were reading the chapter. All right, let's go to the text and jump into looking at some of the snow imagery. So from the very beginning of the chapter, we see some subtle descriptions about snow, right? We see the snow was beaten down on the walks and in the street, but it piled high on the fences and puffed on the roof, right? The houses were dark lumps against the snow. To me, snow really represents and symbolizes resistance. The town's desire to resist. And so as that desire grows, so does the snow. We can actually see this even more exemplified in something that Annie says later on page 72. So Annie arrives to Molly's house, and really everybody's coming to Molly's house. We're going to see Annie, we're going to see Tonder, we're going to see Mayor Orden and Dr. Winter and these two Anders brothers. They're all going to Molly's house. What I want you to notice is what Annie says about the soldiers and how they brought winter early, right? War always brought bad weather, or bad weather brought a war. I don't remember which. But there's some connection between the snow and this desire to resist, this resistance movement that really has started off in the town. So I think that's really what's being represented by the snow. All right, let's get to the good stuff. Let's get to Lieutenant Tonder. So Lieutenant Tonder arrives at Molly's house because he's noticed her in town. She's a beautiful woman, right? She's a really beautiful girl. She's single, and we know why she's single at this point, but Tonder doesn't know that, which is an interesting little dichotomy. And Annie hides, right? She goes and hides when there's a knock on the door. And so Tonder and Molly begin this conversation, and we see in this conversation just how humanized Lieutenant Tonder is, right? He says, I've seen you in town. I know you're lovely. I know I want to talk to you, right? All I want to do, can't we just forget this war just for a little while? Can't we talk like people together? And Molly, she actually responds kind of favorably to him. He's like, yeah, you're just a lonely guy, right? It's simple as that. You're just lonely, right? And he's like, yeah, you understand me. Like, we get it. So they have this conversation. I mean, Tonder on page 76, right? He reads a poem, shares a poem with her, right? She's like, "Did you write this, Lieutenant?" And he's like, "Yeah, you didn't actually write it, did you?" She calls him out, right? And he kind of gives this little child caught in a lie laugh, like, "No, I didn't, but I thought you'd like it." I mean, this cute, flirtatious conversation. Right? And there seems to be a bit of a rapport building between the two of them. If you forgot what rapport means, go back to some vocab. But Tonder says a few other profound statements here, right? He says, "A man dies without love." It's on page 77. A man needs love. He recognizes that he's a person inside, and he's been forced into this role of a soldier, but what he really misses is human connection, human interaction. And on page 78, I think he says maybe the most important statement that he utters, right? Middle of the page, "You didn't ask to be my enemy. I didn't ask to come here. I'm only a man, not a conquering man. I'm just a man. I'm not a conquering man." And that's so important. Think about the difference between certain characters within this story. Tonder's just a man. He's not a conquering man. But we see other men who are conquering men, right? What's the difference between a conquering man like Lancer, Colonel Lancer, or even Captain Loft, and someone like Lieutenant Tonder, right? He says, "We have a right to life even amongst all this killing." It's another important line for you to draw your attention to. So Steinbeck here humanizes Lieutenant Tonder in a very important way for us to get and understand. Now, Tonder leaves, Annie comes back out, and very quickly after that, Mayor Orden, Dr. Winter, and the Anders boys, they arrive. They're back on the scene. And here, what we see is the plan that the town has for this resistance. They're going to steal George Carell's boat, and they're going to send these two fishermen, the Anders brothers, Will and Tom, to England. They're going to sail to England, and they're going to get help from the Allies. Because what Mayor Orden really emphasizes is they have a desire to resist, but they don't have the means, right? We want to fight back, but we can't. We don't have any tools to fight back with. And at the bottom of page 82 and the top of page 83, Mayor Orden encourages these Anders brothers with some very specific and important lines. And I want to draw your attention to those lines, right? At the top of page 83, he says, "What this is about is revenge against a traitor. These people are angry, the townspeople, and they have no way to fight back. But it's all in little terms. It's people against people, not ideas against ideas," right? Winter supports this, right? "We are disarmed. Our spirit and bodies aren't enough. The spirit of a disarmed man sinks," right? "We want to fight them and we can't," right? "So you need to go to give us weapons," right? "You need to go and get something for us so that we can fight back against these people." Now, when Mayor Orden says this line, and I'm going to actually flip back to the slides for a second. Okay, he says this line, "It's people against people, not idea against idea." I actually disagree with him here. Okay, so this key line on page 83, I actually disagree with him, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. But I think he's actually doing something a little bit disingenuous in the way he talks about this to the boys. So back to the text. Okay, they get motivated. And what's important to remember is that he's trying to motivate the Anders brothers, but Molly is hearing all of this conversation happen, right? She's hearing all of this take place, right? She was initially very receptive in a way, compassionate, understanding to Lieutenant Tonder, right? And at the very end of the chapter, this tapping on the front door continues. Let's flip back to the orange, right? And a man's voice could be heard through the door, and it's Lieutenant Tonder. Molly went to the center lamp, and her burden was heavy on her. So she feels this weight of having to do something. She looked down at the lamp, she looked at the table, and she saw the big scissors lying beside her knitting. She picked them up, wonderingly by the blades. Right? Slowly she raised the shears and placed them inside her dress. "Lieutenant, I'm coming." She's going to the door. And guys, there is no doubt in my mind, not just because I've read the chapter, that Molly stabs Tonder at the end of this chapter, right? She feels this burden. She hears Mayor Orden give this passionate plea to these Anders brothers, "Get us weapons. We have the will but not the means." And Molly realizes, wait a second, I'm looking at these scissors, these shears. I have both the will and the means and the opportunity. And she stabs, she shanks Lieutenant Tonder with these at the end of the chapter, right? And she justifies her actions and her choices, I would say, because she thinks that she's doing the will of the people, right? And this is actually about ideas. It's not just about people. Molly Morden's democratic ideal of freedom overwhelms her ideas of sympathy with Lieutenant Tonder, right? This is really about ideas. If this was just people versus people, she feels sympathy for this person. She feels sympathy for this man, this Lieutenant Tonder, who is just a man. He's not a conquering man, and he's been forced into this position that he doesn't want to be in. She has compassion about that. But these democratic ideas that she has in her head of freedom, right? We're not ruled by anybody we don't elect. That overwhelms her sympathy for him. So it really is ideas against ideas, at least the way I interpret it. So I'm going to push back against Mayor Orden just a little. All right, that's chapter 6. Remember, there's no discussion post for today. We're going to be done with those, at least for individual chapters. We'll do some discussions at the end of the text. I did want to remind you about my Zoom office hours from 10 to 11 this morning, as well as 2 to 3 in the afternoon. And that'll be every day that we have class. Every day we post, those 2-hour blocks will be available for you. And you can come and ask questions or discuss the story further. Whatever you need help with, I'll be there. All right, folks. Well, that wraps up our lesson today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. See you tomorrow.